Okay, so basically what I went through was interviews, selection criterias, and resumes. So is there one of the three that you wanted to focus on more? We did mainly interviews because that was what everyone was really interested in.
Yeah, probably interviews and the selection criteria.
Cool. So the three type of interviews I went through were the government ones, private, and non-for-profit. And it kind of talked about government is quite structured, and then non-for-profit is kind of in between here because it's government funded, but they have more leeway to kind of design their company or organisation to be to have a vision and values and that kind of thing, and it can be more flexible in how they actually gain workers. And then private is really individualised. All of those are quite different, and the way that I've only had one experience of a formal interview, but then I've had quite a few friends, and they've discussed how it kind of works. So yeah, I guess I'll go through each of them. So as I said, government is very structured, and generally the questions, if you get an interview, are based on the selection criteria questions. And when you given your selection criteria, that's graded. So every question is given A, B, C, or D, I think, or insufficient evidence. And the interview, all of the questions are linked to you proving you meet the selection criteria one way or another. And sometimes they actually send you the interview questions about 15 minutes before. Sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 30, depending on the place. They might even write under the interview questions what selection criteria number you're going to be addressing in your answer. Sometimes they don't do that though, so it really depends. But generally these are the kind of big chunks of interviews that will always be a part of it. There will definitely be things that aren't there or extra things that come in depending on what the role is, but often they'll start off with an icebreaker. There's usually 3 people on the panel, might be a team leader, a team manager, and then maybe a fellow allied health worker, a speech or a physio or another AT maybe. And they might just start off with, what got you interested in the job, why do you want to be part of our team, that kind of thing. They often ask a question about what are your strengths, so why should we hire you, or what will you bring to our team, what kind of therapist are you, what kind of therapist would you like to be, because I guess with the interviews, they already know your history with the selection criteria. They're just kind of wanting to see how maybe you would fit into their team and how you present face-to-face as well. The next part that there is always something on is teamwork or communication or managing conflict in the workplace. Sometimes they also have a question around how do you balance working with people and working independently. Can you prove what's your experience in being able to work independently or being able to work collaboratively? How do you manage conflicts? Usually it might be discuss an experience you've had where there's been conflict and how did you overcome it or how did you manage it? Or, in reflection, how would you manage it differently next time? There's always something about communication, so usually it's more related to an experience, so describe an experience where you've had to communicate with someone from a different culture or something like that, and you just chat through what you would consider and what kind of communication you would deliver. There's always not always, but often there's what do you struggle with, or what is something that you might find challenging. I feel I always say, I don't know, sometimes I'm probably not this, but I always say I like to get everything finished, and I always work too hard. I'm a workaholic because I get really passionate about my clients, so I just have to be careful that I don't work too long and finish at the right time. Some people always say that they're a bit of a perfectionist, they like to do everything really well. I think they're the two weaknesses of been told to say to people who have chatted through this kind of stuff. And yeah, they might even like probe a bit more around that. So like, you know, how do you manage that? How does that affect you in the workplace and that kind of stuff? I find often like it's the probing that's the most challenging because it sort of catches you off guard and you're like, oh, did I say the wrong thing? Or
Yeah, because are they, like, if you're aware of your weaknesses and you're kind of like proving you're working on like
yeah.
is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's a good thing. Like, if you
Yeah.
have the awareness and you're working on it, then that's great.
Yeah.
I think it's often more related to the current team they have and what is your weakness, is that going to fit in or not, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to work out team dynamics because that's a really big part in government jobs is, like working as a team, managing that conflict, managing maybe differences in like work approaches. So that's a big thing that they look at in interviews, like you as a person and how you work in a team. Yeah. Probably the biggest part of these interviews are case studies. So you get 2 to 3 case studies. You get them sent to you about 10 minutes before the interview via email usually, and they will discuss a specific client. They might prompt you to go through like the intervention process or the assessment process. I've had case studies where you go through all of them, so assessment, intervention and evaluation. Have questions that just ask you to address what would you consider before the assessment. So how would you prepare for it? Had questions around how would you manage this client given these number of barriers, sort of thing. So I'll give you a case study now, an example one, and then maybe in 10 minutes, do you want to do like a practice interview answer? So that's what all the other students did, which was really, they said it was really beneficial. So, okay, so
is it going to be recorded by me doing that?
I'll just stop it and we can do it after.